Hey there, and welcome to Under the Roof, the official podcast of Baker Roofing Company. I'm Todd Kavanaugh.
And I'm Matt Elban, and we're here to connect the dots between field and office, leadership and crew, values and action.
In each episode, we dive into the stories, lessons, and updates that matter to our team.
From safety and career growth to company milestones and good old-fashioned storytelling, it's all about living out what makes Baker, Baker. Let's get into it. So guys, welcome back. If you're joining us for the second part, I would highly encourage you to go back and listen to the first part. But we have John Matthews here with us talking about a lot of things. ESOP, economy of culture, has been a phrase we've used quite a bit. We really like that. Honesty of the process. And we're looking forward to getting back into it with John. So John, welcome back to part 2, and let's get after it.
I'm a firm believer that most people want their hard work to mean something more than a paycheck. And I think that comes in the form of pride and quality of what they do. It comes in the form of the relationships they build over time in their professional lives. I think it comes in the term of what they can do for their families over time. I think it's important to people to build a life, if you will, of their choosing, and then to see that grow. And so I think all of those get accelerated, even mentally, if not physically. You go from being an employee of an institution to an owner of an institution, regardless of the shares you have or don't have. The fact that you have a thin slice of the pie and you feel the pride of that and the pride of meaning, I think it just accelerates each of those, where pride and quality, pride in your relationships, pride in what you can do for your families, it broadens. So I think that obviously we've built a great culture that values people, that values their families over time. And I think everybody who has been with Baker for a long time or even a short time recognizes that and appreciates that. I think all the organizational shift to an ESOP has done is accentuate that, accelerate that, and create additional value for folks within those lines. So I don't think it's a game changer. I think it's a game enhancer, in that we all were moving in a common direction with purpose. And now we're all moving in that same common direction with perhaps a greater purpose, not only for the collective, but also for us as individuals. I think you mentioned, sort of investment in employee growth and training and how that sort of phases in with this as well. And I think investments to improve the business and its people aren't going to change, as they're some of the most important investments the company can make to improve performance. So over the course of time, if you look back at the safety and risk management program we have, which is fantastic, I'd call it best in the industry, and the work that team does and the skill sets of that team. And then you look beyond that into the operational quality control and enhancement as that team has built, which incorporates into it training, both on a professional level and on a technical level. And these are all costs to the business that, if you don't know the business and you don't understand the difficulties of the business and you don't appreciate the risks of the business, you might say is a burden. But what we know, this is where outside ownership gets a little quirky for folks, because they might not see that. They may say these are costs we need to reduce. But what they don't realize is that in the development of all of those programs, it has compounded our ability to do more work because we operate safely. We understand that. We value that. We are attentive to quality, which means we're going back to jobs fewer times to repair items. We're going back to deal with post-install leaks on a less regular basis. Our customers are happier with the quality. Our manufacturers are happier with the quality. And then as we continually train both new and experienced staff on new products, on the elevation of where manufacturers have gone in research and development, we're keeping everyone technically proficient in as advanced a state as possible. That's the kind of momentum you can't change. And if you stop it, it takes a very long time to get it back. So as we look at this collectively, I think we really need to recognize and value programs like that only enhance our professionalism as we grow.
So, John, talk through a lot of like the advantages of the decision to go ESOP and how that can benefit us in the market and benefit us with training and hiring and retention. Let's do an honest assessment, though. What are maybe some disadvantages of being employee owned and independent compared to being part of one of these other platforms? Or where do we have to work harder, I guess, or maybe smarter to compete?
I think on a tactical level, or on a level where we're really competing for work, the ability of a larger company to scale its lead generation operations is relevant. And so you look at a Cinemark, they have just a really aggressive lead generation program that helps create new customers and identify new projects on a national scale. If you take a larger construction conglomerate that buys a roofing company or buys 10 roofing companies and employs some of its lead generation techniques and designs them for those companies, that's where it's hard to maybe compete. And that has really nothing to do with our organizational structure, it has more to do simply with size and national presence. Yet we can compete on a super regional basis. We just know that if we go into new markets, it's going to be a little more challenging. And talk to any of our GMs in a new market, any of our sales reps in a new market, any of our department heads in a new market, they know that it's much more difficult to gain trust of customers in a new market than it is in a place like Raleigh or Charlotte or Nashville where we're known. So I think that's relevant. I think a second piece of this falls back again to culture. So much of this, culture permeates so much of this. And so it's not a disadvantage, but I think there's an easy out when you're not performing and you're part of a larger umbrella. And that is meaning a larger company. And that is, well, we're not doing well because of X, Y, and Z. Whatever that has to do, whether that be the corporate office, whether that be corporate programs. And as a roofing contractor, we fit into that mold sometimes where we're a larger company and we don't always suggest the right practices, but we're always earnest about trying to improve and trying to find ways to be more efficient. And it can sometimes be easy to say, well, that didn't work because Raleigh said do it, it doesn't work. I think when you look at the ESOP model, though, it changes the game a little bit because ownership said do it, so we did it and it didn't work. Or the big giant company headquarters in Toronto said do it and it didn't work. I think now it's on all of us to say it needs to work and it's on our shoulders. There's no looking back. There's no blaming it up, above, sideways, down. We all take our piece of what we do and we all need to work on it as effectively and professionally as we can. So that's long-winded, but I just think that it's not a disadvantage. It is an advantage, but it's when we have to understand and that there's no finger to point to. There's no one to blame. Our progress, our growth, our success falls on each of our shoulders every day.
I want to pull out that word again that Matt, you did, and John, you said earlier, but economies of culture. And I think the word economy implies some level of numerical value. And we often think about culture as in this intrinsic value to ourselves internally, like having a good company culture has a good, strong intrinsic value to its employees and feeling content and fulfilled in their workplace. But I think also understanding now, especially as employee owners, that the economy of our culture provides measurable value in how we approach our strategy in the marketplace. And I think embracing that aspect of it as employee owners, saying, hey, this is really important for us to feel really good about what we're doing on the inside, but also know that on the outside is looking in, and when they see that, they value it. So I really like that word economy of culture, and I think I'm going to, as a communicator by trade, try to embrace that more internally.
The other aspect of economy of culture is that, and again, they're words you wouldn't necessarily put together, but if we have 27 branches, we can't have 27 cultures. Or everybody would be moving in a different direction, or they'd be running into each other, or it would be simply be divergent. And when we think of an economy of culture, we think of one collective culture. And that's very powerful. And that resonates, especially as you grow into different markets, because there are very few organizations that can retain a culture as they grow and also continue to value it. And I think we value it more internally. But what we don't realize is that when our customers see that, they value it as well. And not all do. But when they recognize that they get the same honest answer in Nashville that they're going to get in Orlando, that they're going to get in Raleigh, that they're going to get in Richmond or Harrisonburg, that has a value that we almost can't measure. And it goes back to, what does the customer want? They want simplicity and they want honesty. And so I think when you think of one culture, an economy of culture, there's a lot of power within that, as opposed to saying, well, we just want to buy 27 companies. We don't really care what their culture is. We just need to get market share and have their profits roll off into our P&L.
I've said for a long time that, like, one of my favorite things at Baker is when you call into a branch and you hear, it sounds completely different, right? You got a regional accent on the other end of that phone, but what's being said and how you're treated, it's the same across the footprint. And that's our goal, right? That is the economy of scale we're talking about. Regional accent, sure. Hey, how you doing? But it sounds different, but it's the same all the way through how you're treated, which that's our mission. That's the vision, right?
On our previous episode, we talked to a gentleman, Reed Ribble, who owned his own roofing company, president of the NRCA, and ultimately became a congressman in the U.S. Congress. And he had to make kind of an expedited exit from the ownership of his company. But he had said to us, if I was given a little bit more time, I would have very seriously considered ESOP for my company rather than what I did. And so, Matt had said, like, hey, let's get honest for a second. So let's get another honest question. I think some people will probably wonder, hey, this sounds great. If employee ownership is such a great competitive model, then why isn't everybody doing it? What's kind of an honest answer to that?
And again, we get in terms with all this, probably requires some explanation. I think the one explanation for why isn't everybody doing ESOP is it suggests at some level a loss of control from what we consider a small or concise level of ownership to a much broader level of ownership. It suggests a change in how a company operates from being very closely held and very closely managed to having just a broader spectrum of ownership and interest and involvement from outside influences. We now have an independent board member. We never had that before. That's independent outside. We now have an ESOP trustee who sits in on board meetings and speaks to the interests of the trust. Never had that before. So for a lot of owners who are looking to maybe stay in a business, but also not give up control, which is a tough thing to do, ESOP is a different game. You're accountable to that trust. You're accountable to that group, and you are being held to a higher standard of professional management than perhaps you held yourself to before. The other piece of it is complicated. You now have an ESOP trustee. You have a trust that holds shares. You have to figure out how all those shares are allocated mathematically. You have a trust administrator that does all that and does a census. You have to issue, which we'll be doing, I think, in the next few months, issue statements. And so it's a complex process that you can't just hand off to somebody and say, here, do it. You have to get involved with it. You have to try to understand it. And then you have to try to administer it to the best of your ability. So it's not the easiest route, is my explanation. You lose some control and management. It's very complex to administer. And then a third piece, which is the least important piece, is that take anything you've got, whether it's a motorcycle, a car, a boat, bike. If you sell it to a friend, you are probably not going to sell it for as much as you would to somebody you advertise it to that sees it in online and comes and buys it. You just know. You don't know that person. You're going to get the highest price you can for the value of whatever it is, and you're going to move on. And if they're comfortable with that, they're going to pay market rate for it. So when you look at a transition of ownership, when you sell ownership to a known group, you're probably not going to sell it for the highest market rate you can, because you want it to be fair, you want it to be valued appropriately, and you know that at the day after the closing, in some respects, all are accountable to each other on that. And so when you look at an ESOP structure, an owner of a manufacturing company could go out and sell it to private equity, one of those investment firms we mentioned before, or a larger company in the manufacturing business that has a lot of cash and is willing to pay for it, and probably get a higher sale value or price than they would if they said, you know what, we want to have this internally valued and we would like to figure out a way to sell it to our employees. So I think those are the three reasons when you talk honestly about why wouldn't you do an ESOP: loss of control, complicated process or structure, and then is there a value discount in doing so? When we look at our situation, we were comfortable with all three of those. So we were comfortable with expanding control. We were comfortable with having outside influences. We were comfortable with having greater employee influences, and we welcome that. It's going to be complicated. We're going to all figure it out together, and we're comfortable with that because we've done that type of thing before. And we know that with good resources and good outside professionals helping us, we can do this. So we have confidence that we can make this work regardless of how complicated it is. And then the third, when you go through a transition for a 100-year-old business that has a lot of legacy, what you're most concerned about is the continuance of the business. What format gives us the most successful path for this business being around another 100 years and operating in as similar a fashion as it has for the last 100, but at a much larger scale? Tradition, influence, respect of individuals, all of those things factor in. Market value, while it's a factor, is not the driving factor and wasn't for us. It was, how does this business continue to operate as it has for another 100 years, but at a much higher level and one that everyone benefits from? So when you look at all those three as roadblocks to an ESOP, and a lot of companies would look at those as roadblocks to an ESOP, we actually looked at those as opportunities to the future of the business and the business operating on a larger scale with greater influence in the future.
That's been good. That's why I was like, hey, you dialed in on some of these points. So yeah, Matt, if you just want to do your closing question.
So John, a minute ago, you mentioned the idea of, you could sell that bike or that car or whatever it is at the market rate, which would maybe be higher than if you're selling it to a friend or someone you know. And the advantage to that is if you sell it to someone you know, it's probably going to look the same as what you sold it, and the legacy will be preserved, right? You sell that car or that boat or whatever to somebody else that you don't know, the likelihood that it's going to look anything like what it does when you sold it in the near future afterwards, I would imagine it's probably lower. I mean, I've sold stuff online before, and I didn't care what it looked like once I sold it. I was just happy to get the money for it, right? This is different, right? This was family owned. This had a lot of legacy. This is 100-plus-year-old business that has impacted and influenced a lot of people over the years. And so now, as owners, for the employee owner who's listening maybe and thinking, okay, I get this is strategically smart. It makes sense. What you've all said today makes a lot of sense. But what does it mean for me? What do you want them to take away from this conversation?
And I think as we get more tactical in how the ESOP rolls out and we begin to start talking about statements and growth and all of those things in value, we want to always be reminded of what we've been entrusted with. And so I think if your grandfather, your great-grandfather passed down, say, his Medal of Honor to you, and you had it, very much to the analogy you were just using of if you sold it to somebody else or you kept it in the family, you're more likely going to take pride in that. You're going to shine it. You're going to keep it in a shadow box. You're going to display it somewhere where others can see it because you're proud of it. And you want people to know that that's part of your heritage. And I think if you take that example and you put it in this perspective, for most of us that have been here for decades, this is part of our heritage. We may not have the same last name. We may have come into the business different from some others, but the reality is we've all been here together. We've all seen it grow. We've helped it scale, and it's all part of our heritage. And so I think that as any employee, now an employee owner looks at this, it's not an obligation. It's more of a preservation of what we have come to value in the heritage we've had. So everybody grows up differently. But it's uncommon that a group of 1,100 people can come together and all have something be a part of their heritage. And so I think that's what's powerful. The trick is now, all right, how does that apply to me? And I think that's what we're going to begin to see as we begin talking about this subject and doing other podcasts in the future and other announcements is there is a collective component to this, and we've talked a lot about it, and I think we all have it. It is our heritage. We have to preserve it. We have to polish it. We have to put it in places where people will see it because we're proud of it. And now we have to perform so that each of us benefit individually. And what that'll basically mean is at some point in the very near future, we're probably all going to get a statement, and we're going to get a statement that says, hey, your value in the share of the company is close to zero. And I think we all have to realize that is because we are at the starting point of sort of this next generation of heritage growth. And so that is a great place to start. It means the game is beginning for all of us. And as we march forward, our continued value to this sort of new organization will be reflected in those statements as they increase year over year over year. But I think we all need to recognize that we're at the starting point. We're at the beginning point of not something brand new, but we're at the beginning point of the next generation of our own heritage and legacy, and we have the ability to shape that. Does that answer that?
Does to me, yeah. People taking a personal look at the business and saying, I'm part of this. I need to put my effort into this, my best effort into this for the betterment of myself, but also the betterment of everyone that I'm working with. I mean, that's a pretty real honest answer.
I think if we were to all wake up in the morning and go, I don't feel like doing this. I'm sort of working for the man or the woman, where do I get value in this? Or am I just a tool in the box that helps somebody else get somewhere else? And I think what we have to see in the ESOP model is that I can wake up every morning, I can tie my shoes, I can scrub the dirt off a little bit, I can put on my uniform, and the pride is that I am working today for myself and for all of the people around me, as opposed to working for a large conglomerate corporation in Belgium or a private equity investor in California, or even a single owner locally. I'm working for myself, and I'm working for the collective benefit of those around me. And that's really powerful to every individual employee we have.
I love the language that you use, John, of legacy and heritage. I think like a lot of us, as you mentioned, that have been here for literally decades, and even for people that haven't been here quite so long, being a part of this organization becomes part of your identity. And I think even specifically being in roofing becomes part of your identity. Reed spoke about that as taking pride in what we do as a company. And I love the starting line comparison too, because this really is a starting line for everybody. And I hope everybody here that's listening to this and that I see each and every day, like are here with us in 10 or 15 years and enjoying the fruits of starting this race together. And so, John, this has been really valuable. I really appreciate it. I think the onus is on us to keep talking about this. I think we've all heard a lot of great stories, or at least maybe some of us started to hear some success stories of ESOP. And I think one of the things that's a great reminder is it's not a guarantee. All of us have an onus to be doing our very best, profit we can, loss we must, to make this platform successful. And so I think this gives us a little bit more clear of a picture to keep having this conversation internally, encouraging one another. So, John, thank you very much.
Thank you, John. So for everyone listening, you're part of the company with a real competitive advantage. Independence, employee ownership, long-term thinking, local presence with scale capabilities. These aren't just nice to haves. They're strategic differentiators that help us win work, serve our customers, and quite frankly, do it better than anyone else.
Thanks for listening to Under the Roof. That wraps up this episode of Under the Roof. Thanks for joining us and being part of the Baker Roofing family.
If you liked what you heard, share it with your crew. Hit the follow button and keep the conversation going wherever you work.
We're here to keep you informed, inspired, and included, because the more connected we are, the better we work together.
And as always, we'll leave you with this. We shall do good work, at a profit if we can, at a loss if we must, but always good work. See you next time.